It now has 16 facilities across the country and has created over 300 American jobs. Cloud Blue is a leading provider of recycling services for electronic equipment, including computers, servers, printers, and smartphones. I'm sure there's a lot of growing demand for that. Randy was selected by Institutional Investor as one of the top influencers in the finance industry and was named a winner in the New York Top 10 Awards by the Executive Council of New York. Randy's also a member of the Smithtown Chamber of Commerce and an active participant with New Yorkers for Growth. Randy is married to Cheryl. They reside in St. James with their children, Noah and Sasha. After falling short by only a couple of hundred votes in the closest congressional race in 2010, Randy is poised, confident, and ready to run again in the 1st Congressional District of New York, and we're pleased to introduce him to you today.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. I'm always terrible with microphones, so I'll just speak, and hopefully it's loud enough. If people can't hear me, just stop me. So I appreciate the introduction. It's beautiful to be out here. I've had the opportunity to be at a few events here, and it's always such a wonderful venue. We've got a great day here. I can't take credit for the weather, but I'm glad it's here. And the North Fork, you know, it's such an undiscovered jewel for a lot of people, and what tremendous resources, natural resources, what tremendous opportunity there is here. So again, thank you for having me. I would like to take a little step back and tell you a little bit more about my background and kind of being a business person. And I love speaking to the U.S., the chambers, because I am a business person. That's my whole background. I've never been in elective office before. And that's the perspective that I have when I'm running for office as a business person. So I did not come from a family with any money as an introduction. I was brought up by a single mom. My dad left when I was very young, and we didn't have any money. So fortunately, my mom was able to get a job. She worked extremely hard to bring me and my brother up. So I understand how, for single mothers in particular, how difficult it is to do that. And but my mother, we still had breakfast and dinner together every day, which was a huge commitment on her part, but something that really helped keep our family together. And as I said, after college, I worked my way through school. I met my wife, Cheryl. I'm 41 years old. I met my wife, Cheryl, in college. And she's a pediatrician today. She practices in Brookhaven. So after working in finance, I became an entrepreneur and started 2 companies from the ground up. And as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, I really appreciate the challenges that are involved with that. And it's everything from managing employees. That's always very difficult. Finding the right people for your company. Figuring out how to sell your product. An electronic recycling company, we approach a lot of companies. We want to recycle their old computer equipment. It's difficult to make that sale. And finding the right salespeople, as a lot of you know, is one of the toughest things to do in business today. And then making sure that you can find that right balance between charging a good rate and making sure you're a profitable business and winning new business. That's always difficult as well. And particularly in a recession, that's tough, where your customers themselves are being hurt and they can afford to only pay less. So you have to go back to your own company and find ways to cut costs. And it's that discipline that I have as a business person is what I think is missing right now in our government. And I've never been involved with elective politics before, been head down trying to grow my businesses. But particularly around when my kids were born, and I have a 5-year-old and a 10-month-old baby, I began to realize the consequences of what's happening today in this country. That we have a country run by men and women who have no practical experience, who have never been in the private sector before. Forget about owning a business and leading a business. Folks, many of them have never even worked in private sector business. Yet, we're entrusting these people to run arguably the biggest corporation we've ever seen in the world, the United States of America economy. And that is an extremely difficult job. And these folks simply don't have the skills to do it. And instead what's happening in Washington, and they're guilty on both sides of the aisle, it's been about partisan politics. It's been about fighting, it's about getting nothing accomplished, and ignoring many of these critical issues that are facing us. From healthcare, we were talking earlier about healthcare, to keeping jobs in America, growing the jobs in America, manufacturing here in America, our energy policy, go down to the huge issues, reforming Social Security and Medicare, so we can guarantee that our seniors and then we as we get older actually have those critical programs in place. And these are difficult topics to cover. The solutions are complicated, You can't fix them with a campaign slogan. They're going to have to be dealt with in a bipartisan manner. But yet, the people we have in office today don't seem to take that kind of approach. And as a result, we're getting what we have now, which is gridlock in Washington, problems that continue not to be addressed. We've got a debt that's approaching $15 trillion. We're running an annual deficit over $1 trillion. The problem gets worse and worse. And unfortunately, it's one of these things that if you don't address it now, it's only going to be worse in the future. Every day, we don't make those difficult decisions. Every day, we're not honest about the troubles we're facing. It just makes the damage even worse a year or 2 years down the road. But people elected office don't want to raise their hands and talk about it because all they care about is getting reelected. And the easiest way to get reelected is to do absolutely nothing. Because if you do nothing, you're not going to offend anybody. If you take no positions, nobody's going to think you're right or wrong. You're not going to think anything. That's why most people don't even know who their elected officials are. The problem with that is that these folks, and we only send one congressman here from the 1st Congressional District, there are only 435 in the U.S. Congress and the House of Representatives. These folks aren't addressing these issues. They're not taking them seriously. And I think we need to make a change there. And that's what I'm running. As a business person, somebody who's built businesses from the ground up, somebody who knows how to create jobs, somebody who understands the problems that are facing small businesses. And in the 1st Congressional District, it is all about small businesses. I mean, they are the main engine for jobs here. And you know this better than I do. So we need a representative who's going to help them, help small businesses flourish, create an environment. Government doesn't create jobs, but government can help create an environment that encourages job growth. So I've laid out a 10-point job plan, which we've left on the table. It's actually filled with lots of facts and figures and ideas. It's a little shorter than Mitt Romney's, 57 job plan. But what I'd like to do is maybe talk about a couple of the issues that I address in the plan, and then be happy to answer any questions you've got. So let me just go through some of the things that I think are important today. One is healthcare. So we were talking about this earlier. We've got two major problems with healthcare today. One is we have rising costs, astronomical costs. And my wife's a doctor, as I said, so we understand personally what's happening in the healthcare system. And as an employer of over 300 people, keeping up with the rate increases we get every year is just devastating for my company. So costs in healthcare are rising rapidly. And at the same time, we've got too many people who are uninsured, which is particularly for the poor, for children, for folks who can't afford to care for themselves. We don't want to have anybody not have insurance. We want to try to provide a safety net for those folks. But the system we have today is broken. And unfortunately, the president has put forth this convoluted, very expensive package of things to try to fix the system. And in fact, I think it makes it even worse. So what I propose here are some common sense measures to help bring down the cost of healthcare. Things like allowing insurance companies to operate across state lines. And we all know that competition leads to efficiencies. It forces companies to be more competitive. It also forces innovation, because if you want to succeed in a business that's very competitive, you have to find ways to do things differently, apply technology, find different ways to do processes. But healthcare, because there's so many walls between each of the states, and because some insurance companies effectively have monopolies in certain markets, there isn't that healthy dose of competition. So let's let insurance companies compete across state lines. Let's have tort reform. I think it's very important, Unfortunately, insurance premiums for doctors are astronomical, and that's huge. Particularly, talk to an OB, who's giving birth to babies, who's helping deliver babies. A lot of doctors won't deliver babies anymore because the costs are so high and the reimbursement rates are so low. And it's not just the insurance itself, but it's all the liability that goes around with it. So you've got doctors practicing effectively defensive medicine because they are so concerned about getting sued. So let's have some tort reform. Doesn't mean we don't want to protect the individual from malpractice, but at the same time, it's gone way overboard. And you see states where they have had tort reform. You see doctors flocking to those states. You're seeing decreases in costs. Then we need to do the same thing as much as possible on a nationwide basis. We also should give folks the option to buy many different kinds of insurance plans. So a catastrophic plan. If you're a young person, like my campaign aide, who's 23 or 24 years old and thinks he's going to live forever, and he might be hesitant to buy an insurance plan, right? Can't even live forever?
I will.
Okay. Why not give that person the option to buy a catastrophic plan, which is a very low premium, and it covers him or her if there's some sort of disaster, they have to go to the hospital, they get in a car crash or something like that happens. If you give people more options, then you're going to have folks buying different kinds of insurance. And I think these are some of the things that we can do to help on the healthcare end. Energy costs, something that's near and dear for us out here on Long Island, where energy costs are so expensive. A lot of businesses choose not to put jobs here or come to Long Island because energy costs are so high. Now, I'm in the recycling business. Logistics is a big portion of our cost structure. So how do we bring down energy costs? Now, we need an all-of-the-above policy. And I'm all for alternative energy. I think that's great. We want to cut down on pollution, and it's something we need to look at. But we also have to be realistic that most of our cars and our infrastructure, our transportation today is fueled by oil. That's just the reality of the situation we face today. And I think energy independence has to be one of our utmost goals. And for a couple of reasons. First of all, and this is a national security issue, we depend on countries in the Middle East and other places around the world to fulfill our energy needs. That's very expensive for us, which alongside with just the cost of oil is the cost of supporting regimes there, because we need to have political stability. And God forbid if something does happen, that could have terrible consequences for how much we pay at the pump. At the same time, here in the United States, we do have energy. We do have oil. We do have natural gas, things that we can tap into. You'd be creating tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs. You'd help bring down the cost of energy, and then we'd also be the masters of our own fate. And that's something that could help New York State, and something that could help the whole country. And I think all of us, again, understanding we want to protect our environment, we need to find that right balance and ensure that America gains energy independence, creating jobs and bringing down the cost of energy on Long Island and across the country. We want a congressman who's going to help sell this district to other companies. So one thing I talk about in my plan is putting somebody in my office, and nobody does it today. Tim Bishop doesn't do it, but nobody else does it. Putting someone in my office whose full-time job will be going to companies and trying to encourage them to come to Long Island. Or if they're coming already to Long Island, encouraging to add more employees. A salesperson. And I think that's really important. We have so much to offer here. We've got Stony Brook University. We've got Brookhaven National Lab. We've got great resources here. It's just a beautiful place to live. We've got the proximity to New York City. Great quality of life. So lots of things that we can offer. A lot of companies don't know about that. So somebody in my office whose full-time job would be to do that. Then the second person in my office is what we call the capital coordinator. And that's somebody who's going to reach out to the private sector and public sector funding opportunities and connect businesses with them. So if you own a bakery and you want to expand and open a new one.
You actually.
There you go. You look like a bakery. There you go. If you want to open up a new bakery, mention opening up a new bakery. Being able to hook you up with a funding source. And hopefully that'll be a local funding source. If it's not, then we can help you go to statewide or even nationwide. And that's somebody whose only job would be to be a capital coordinator. And then spending a lot of my time selling the district as a congressman. And being shameless about it. I mean, one of my jobs, probably my foremost job, is to represent this district. And this district needs right now more jobs. It needs a bigger private sector. And the private sector is so important for so many reasons. First of all, property taxes. All of us pay property taxes, and property taxes are sky high. And the way you can bring down your cost of property taxes is to have a bigger tax base. The more businesses we have here, the more they can absorb of that cost. The second thing that we want to do is to create jobs for young people. When our young folks are graduating from college, there aren't any jobs for Long Island. So we've seen a 12% decrease in 25 to 34-year-olds over the last 10 years who are here on Long Island. That's a critical part of our workforce that we need. They're choosing not to be here. So these are many reasons why jobs are so important and why your congressperson needs to be a salesperson for the 1st Congressional District. We also have to have somebody who helps get through all the red tape here. Now we've got national red tape, we've got state red tape, and we've got local red tape, which I'm sure all of you can personally attest to. And you don't need a lot of that. I mean, permitting processes should be online. There's a lot of common sense things that we can do, and as a congressman, I'd like to push that with the local elected officials. If it's Sean Walter here in Riverhead, if it's Mark Lesko, Democrat in Brookhaven, it doesn't make a difference. It's about how we help businesses create jobs here and how we make it easier for them to create jobs. It's also about helping our veterans. And one of the things I talk about in my plan is incentives for companies to hire veterans. So one idea I had was to enable companies to write off 150% of the wages of a veteran. So the veteran, you hire a veteran in your company, and instead of just expensing 100% of his or her salary, you can expense 150% of his or her salary. It's an extra incentive for companies to hire veterans. my company, Cloud Blue, has a preferential program for veterans, recognizing all the sacrifices they've made for their country. And with so many of them coming home now, with our missions overseas winding down, some of them, there's more than ever a need for jobs for them. And then the very local issues, the farmers. I talk about a plan here to help the farmers in this district. And there's a whole myriad of things, from the death tax, the EPA being overreaching in its overregulation, putting in a 3-year work visa program for folks who are here legally today, but folks who go through a lot of paperwork. Farmers will tell you that it's very obstructive right now, so putting something in it just makes it easier and less expensive for the farmers. A whole host of things. And then for the fishermen, that's also a critical industry for us here on Long Island, and they're facing a whole bunch of problems. I could talk about the Magnuson Act. That's a very critical piece of legislation where Long Island fishermen have much lower quotas, catch quotas, than other states do. So we'll have our boat right next to a boat from Connecticut, and they can take more than we can, which just isn't fair. So these are some of the ideas. As I said, it's a very detailed plan, but I think it's important to have a substantive campaign, a campaign where we talk about the issues, and I welcome that. Because at the end of the day, if we don't sit down, we don't actually arrive at some solutions, we're never going to fix the problem. And it makes a difference. What happens in Washington makes a difference. It doesn't only affect our lives, but frankly, more importantly, it affects our children and our grandchildren's lives. And I've lived the American dream. I've come from nothing, built business and built it up, and have been able to provide for my family. Are those same opportunities going to be around for our children, our grandchildren? I'm worried they're not unless we make some changes. America is the greatest country there's ever been, and will always be, but we can be even better. And we can continue down the path of greatness if we work together and if we use common sense, which is severely lacking in Washington today. So, again, thank you so much for having me today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
What's the problems with no one?
So, yeah, not my no, the other no. The problem is that, and again, if you talk to the folks in the recreational fishing and the commercial fishing industry, there's not a lot of science-based. A lot of the catch limits are not science-based. So there's a lot of concerns about today, the way they've calculated what the fish population is for different species, and what our limits and what our catch limits should be, aren't done equitably and aren't actually reflecting the reality of the situation.
I just use them for weather forecast and sailing, so I didn't know they were also involved in.
No, they are. So it's a hotbed issue. And again, the fishermen are incented to protect our natural resources. I mean, that's how a lot of them make their money. The recreational fishing community needs to make sure that we have a vibrant fish population. So everybody's sort of on the same page there. Let's just do it in a way that we strike that balance to ensure that we can support the commercial industry, at the same time preserve the stock and make sure that we're protecting the environment. Other questions? Please.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, in the interest of job growth, why is chairman of Cloud Blue, the company's headquartered in Georgia as opposed to Suffolk County?
The CEO of Cloud Blue is based in Georgia, and frankly, I let him choose where we put the company. So some of you have partners, sometimes you do. So I've got an office in Port Jeff Station, but we have locations all around the country. I didn't start Cloud Blue to run for political office. I started Cloud Blue to create a company, to create jobs, and that's what my priority is.
What's your position on balanced budget?
I support a balanced budget. Look, we have to have pressure on our government to actually balance the budget. We actually need a budget. It's been now 3 years since we passed the budget. Imagine your businesses if you didn't have a budget. And you still got paid. And I'm also for linking the pay of our representatives. If there's no budget, they shouldn't have any pay. And that's a quick way to make sure that they actually pass the budget. And unless we mandate that it's balanced, it's never going to be balanced. You just can't operate that way. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. We just don't have unlimited funds. And eventually, all this printing of money is going to catch up on us. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. We've got to just stop. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I'll be available, and somewhere my website is randy2012.com. There's a copy of the jobs plan there. And you can always just reach out and email the campaign if you want to talk to me. I'm always very accessible, so thank you so much.